Here are your latest local and international news updates covering major developments in the US and around the world. Global tensions. US and Europe clash over Greenland. Tensions are rising between the United States and European Union after President Donald Trump warned of new tariffs against European countries opposing US pressure over Greenland. EU leaders are now considering retaliatory tariffs, warning the dispute could escalate into a broader trade conflict. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, global leaders warned the world is entering a new geopolitical reality, shaped by conflict, fractured trade, and shifting alliances. Ukraine, Middle East tensions, and global security dominated discussions. Ukraine talks continue. Ukraine confirmed talks with U.S. officials are continuing in Davos, focusing on reconstruction and long-term security guarantees as Russian strikes continue, damaging energy infrastructure. Deadly floods in southern Africa. Severe flooding across Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe has killed at least 100 people, destroying thousands of homes and displacing entire communities. Iran protests and international warning protests continue across Iran amid reports of crackdowns and communications disruptions. President Trump warned the U.S. could take very strong action if protesters are killed as international pressure intensifies. South Korea. Former president sentenced in South Korea. A court sentenced former President Yoon Suk Yeol to 5 years in prison for obstructing justice related to a past martial law declaration. Uganda election unrest. Post-election protests in Uganda turned deadly, with reports of multiple deaths and opposition leader Bobi Wine placed under house arrest. Greenland standoff sends markets down. Global markets fell sharply today after President Trump threatened new tariffs linked to his controversial Greenland strategy, with major U.S. indexes including the S&P 500 and Dow Jones dropping more than 1%, and European markets also sliding in response to heightened geopolitical risk. Trump's Greenland push sparks diplomatic firestorm. President Trump's renewed ambition to acquire Greenland for the U.S., including provocative rhetoric and mock-up images of planting a U.S. flag, is dominating international headlines. His stance has drawn sharp criticism from European leaders, who call the plan absurd and warn against any coercive action. Denmark and the EU have rejected the idea of selling or ceding sovereignty, and NATO allies are preparing countermeasures amid plans that could escalate tensions around the Arctic. EU pushback at Davos. Tariffs are a mistake. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen strongly condemned the U.S. tariff threats connected to Greenland, labeling them a mistake and urging unity among EU members. She emphasized respect for Greenland's and Denmark's sovereignty and warned against punitive tariffs between longtime allies. World Economic Forum. High Stakes Week. The 2026 Davos Summit opened with a mix of tech ambition, elite business presence, and geopolitical tension. Leaders and CEOs from major firms, including executives from AI and finance sectors, are front and center as global economic and strategic concerns clash with discussions on innovation and growth. Russia-Ukraine war continues. Explosions and missile activities were reported in Kyiv today as the conflict between Ukraine and Russia continues. The Ukrainian Air Force warned of ongoing attack threats as winter conditions and infrastructure damage persist. UN chief cancels Davos trip. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has canceled his planned appearance at the World Economic Forum due to illness, a notable absence as global leaders grapple with rising tensions, including the Greenland controversy and conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. Israel orders forced evacuations in Gaza. United Nations sources report that Israel has ordered the evacuation of Gaza families in areas where evacuations have not previously taken place, a significant move amid ongoing regional instability. Trump's arrival delayed at Davos. Trump's arrival in Switzerland was delayed by an Air Force One technical issue, but his address is now highly anticipated, with world leaders watching for statements on Greenland, trade, security, and international cooperation. Davos 2026. Trump's Greenland push faces resistance. At Davos, Trump's controversial plan to acquire Greenland is meeting pushback from NATO partners who support increased Arctic security but reject any transfer of sovereignty. French, Danish, and other leaders are debating responses as Trump also promotes domestic policy goals. Nationwide, Free America walkout protests. Across the U.S. today, thousands participated in the Free America walkout, a large-scale protest on the one-year anniversary of President Trump's second inauguration. Demonstrators walked out of work, school, and daily activities in cities including Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Miami, and Brooklyn, urging action on immigration policy, civil liberties, and criticism of federal enforcement. Organizers encouraged participants to wear red, white, and blue and join coordinated actions in all 50 states and internationally. U.S. markets reeling on Greenland tensions. Financial markets reacted strongly as the Dow and S&P 500 experienced significant drops amid fears over geopolitical instability tied to Greenland and potential U.S.-Europe trade conflicts. Analysts say investors are watching diplomatic fallout closely as global tensions grow. Market reaction to geopolitics. Global markets saw broad sell-offs linked to geopolitical uncertainty over Greenland, with U.S. stocks falling sharply and gold prices climbing amid risk aversion among investors. Canadian PM criticizes U.S. leadership stance. Canada's Prime Minister said the current world order is under strain, suggesting Western nations have enabled U.S. dominance, commenting amid the Greenland dispute and reflecting broader global unease over shifting power balances. Europe warns against U.S. pressure tactics. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Europe must stand firm against U.S. coercion over Greenland, urging independent action and stressing the importance of respecting sovereignty, even as anti-American consumer sentiment rises in parts of Europe. President Donald Trump's appearance at the World Economic Forum in Davos continues to dominate global headlines amid shifting positions on trade, diplomacy, and Greenland. Trump arrived in Switzerland after a brief delay caused by an Air Force One aircraft issue, eventually landing and traveling to Davos by helicopter. His arrival drew intense attention, with mixed reactions from global leaders and public protests, reflecting growing unease in Europe over his Arctic ambitions. At Davos, Trump launched a signing event tied to his proposed Board of Peace initiative, calling it a step toward resolving global conflicts. However, details about the board's mandate, authority, and international participation remain unclear, prompting skepticism from some allies. In a notable shift, Trump walked back earlier threats to impose tariffs on Europe over Greenland, easing immediate fears of a transatlantic trade escalation. The reversal helped global markets rebound after earlier sell-offs tied to geopolitical uncertainty. Despite the tariff retreat, European leaders remain on edge. Officials from the European Union are set to meet in Brussels to coordinate their response to U.S. pressure and Trump's continued rhetoric regarding Greenland. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen urged Europe to abandon caution and take a firmer stance in defending sovereignty. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived at Davos, holding talks focused on continued support, post-war reconstruction, and security guarantees as Russia's war in Ukraine grinds on. Ukraine remains a central issue in global diplomatic discussions. Trump's Davos speech itself drew mixed reactions, with some leaders welcoming dialogue, while Danish and Greenlandic officials reiterated that Greenland is not for sale, and that NATO does not have authority to negotiate its status. Back in the United States, political tensions remain high as congressional oversight efforts continue, including ongoing fallout from the Epstein investigation and broader debates over executive power and foreign policy authority. U.S. President Donald Trump has filed a dramatic $5 billion lawsuit targeting banking giant J.P. Morgan Chase and its CEO Jamie Dimon, accusing the bank of politically motivated debanking by closing his accounts and those of his businesses without justification. Trump claims the closures disrupted his operations and damaged his reputation, and alleges that the bank even created a blacklist to dissuade other financial institutions from working with him. J.P. Morgan denies the allegations, saying it closes accounts only for legal or regulatory reasons and plans to defend itself in court. Meanwhile, Trump has withdrawn Canada's invitation to join his new Board of Peace initiative, unveiled at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The letter, shared on Truth Social, rescinded the invitation previously extended to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, whose speech at Davos criticizing powerful nations' use of economic tactics drew a standing ovation and sparked diplomatic friction. Carney responded by defending Canada's independence and values after Trump claimed Canada lives because of the United States. The Board of Peace, presented as a group to oversee ceasefires and rebuilding efforts in conflict zones like Gaza, has already seen several key Western allies decline to participate, including including Spain, while countries such as Argentina, Bahrain, Morocco, Pakistan, and Turkey are listed as initial participants. These developments come amid broader global debates at the Davos Forum over sovereignty, international cooperation, and geopolitical order, with European leaders pushing back against U.S. pressure tactics and insisting on respect for existing instruments of global governance like the United Nations. The United States has deployed a large naval force toward the Middle East, including aircraft carriers and destroyers, as tensions with Iran remain high. Trump says the move is defensive and meant to deter violence amid ongoing protests and regional instability. Analysts view the deployment as a significant show of force, with potential global consequences. After days of volatility, global markets rebounded following Trump's decision to walk back tariff threats linked to Greenland and Europe. U.S. and European stock indexes rose as investor fears eased, while gold prices retreated from recent highs. Economists say markets remain sensitive to geopolitical signals coming out of Davos, from a high-stakes banking lawsuit to strained alliances, military positioning, and market reactions. Today's headlines reflect a world navigating political power, economic uncertainty, and shifting global influence.